Hello, crawlers, and yeah, like most of the world, my current obsession is Dungeon Crawler Carl, and they're fantastic books. They're basically what if video games happened in real life. Without too many spoilers, there's a situation that happens. Surviving humans are forced into a dungeon that is basically a live-streamed kind of like Squid Games scenario, but it's a dungeon crawl where you have to go through and find a stairway down to the next floor. And the books are amazing. Matt Dinneman writes a fantastic story, and it has been really, really enjoyable to read the books as I'm going through and kind of learning about the world of Carl and Donut and Mongo and Katya and like all these amazing characters. It's a really, really fantastic story. What's going on, everybody? I'm Jay. Welcome to Square Pegs. And we don't usually talk books on this channel. I do like books. I talk about books every once in a while, but I always kind of tie them back into video games. And that's what's going to happen today, because I really very badly want a Dungeon Crawler Carl video game. I understand it's probably not going to happen anytime soon. They're very focused on the tabletop game and the role-playing game. But I started thinking about like games that really feel like they're in the spirit of the Carl books. And I've got a list together. I don't really know how many it is, but I kind of wrote down games as I was playing them. And I was like, yeah, no, this one fits. This one works. And the one I want to start off with, to me, that is the most like the books, is Vampire Survivors. The books are very clear and very deliberate in the way that they describe the combat that happens to Carl and the other dungeon crawlers on each level, where it's kind of overwhelming, and the odds are very much stacked against each of the crawlers. They're expected to not survive. And endless waves of enemies, endless waves of just a variety of enemies. And one of the things that I really like about it is that there's a lot of tropes involved too. So like lots of stuff like classic monsters like goblins and classic things like bugbears, it's stuff like that. And you get a lot of that in Vampire Survivors as well. There tend to be more undead related and things like that, but it's endless waves and countless enemies that you have to fight. And eventually there's a boss that you have to defeat or a bigger enemy. And that all plays into the books as well. And it just, to me, feels like that would be the easiest win to do a Carl video game, would be to have something where you can unlock the different crawlers and you learn their different abilities. And as they go through the different levels, there's 18 floors. You go through each one, it gets more and more progressively difficult. And that to me feels like Dungeon Crawler Carl to a T. Another one that is like right on the money, and it's anything from this universe, whether you're talking Borderlands, Tales from the Borderlands, or the one I want to talk about here, Tiny Tina's Wonderland. This is right in line with everything that happens with the Carliverse. Carliverse? The Dinniverse, that's it. Named after the author, Matt Dinneman. It's something where the humor is ever present. It's a very funny game, but it's also a very serious set of combat arts and things that you have to do to achieve. And it's hyper violent and gory and just all kinds of stuff that you're able to find. And loot boxes, which is ever present in Dungeon Crawler Carl, is absolutely something that happens in Borderlands and Tiny Tina's Wonderland. It's the closest thing I think we have to a 3D version of Carl in video games is probably any of the Borderlands games or the Tiny Tina's Wonderland game. It's right there. It leans into fantasy. It leans into sci-fi. It blends both beautifully well, and it's just a great, great game. Another one I want to talk about is Hades. And I know I find any excuse to talk about Hades, but Hades kind of feels a little bit like Vampire Survivors in that regard to me, where you go room by room, and as you go into a room, you're met by wave after wave of enemies. And as you go through, there's going to be different level of bosses that you fight. And as the further into the game you go, and the further down into Tartarus you go, the more difficult things get, and the bigger the bosses get, and the more challenging things get, until you eventually have to fight your father Hades himself. And there's something kind of poetic about that, and something that lines up very nicely with what happens in the Carl books, where you're steadily progressing through the dungeon and steadily moving your way through. And it just feels right. And of course it's a great game too. Like Hades is such a fantastic title that it's any excuse I can to have to talk about it, I'm going to take. But it just seems to line up kind of like one-to-one to me. One real quick as well that needs to be mentioned, and this is specifically for the third book. I think it was the third book. The second or third book. There's a lot of trains involved in one of the books. Absolutely Final Fantasy VI. You get to suplex a train. Carl does a lot of damage to a lot of trains in that book, and yeah, that was the first thing I thought of. I was like, oh, this is like suplexing a train in Final Fantasy. It's just really fun. It's such a charming game, and it's my personal favorite Final Fantasy. I think it's the best one that they've made. And the absolute ridiculousness of a guy picking up and suplexing a train is something that I will always remember. And I remember the first time I did it, I just kind of went like, there's no way this is going to work. There's no way I can do it. And he sure as hell did pick up a train and suplex it. And I thought that was amazing. Next one that I think needs to be mentioned, and this is just because it is such a kind of classic RPG and something that really feels customizable, and where you're able to kind of assemble your party the way you see fit, and you're able to kick people out, and you even have points where you're actually able to kill members of your party, and that would be Baldur's Gate 3. First off, the game is stunning, and the writing in the game, while it's a lot of game, and I still stand by the fact that I think it's too much game. I think it's an absolutely massive title, and there's so many decisions that you have to make that it can actually be overwhelming. I do think it's something that is such a signature RPG experience, and something that is just so perfectly in tune with the story of what Dungeon Crawler Carl does, that you can really see a lot of parallels drawn there. And I think that's intentional. Like, I'm not saying that Baldur's Gate 3 set out to be a Dungeon Crawler Carl game or anything like that, but you can see a lot of the tropes that Dinneman leans into in his stories, whether it's the Carl books or Operation Bounce House. He borrows heavily from sci-fi, heavily from movies, heavily from video games. And that's great because it feels natural and it feels real. I think it adds a lot of resonance to the story you're reading because it is a shared experience. It's something that we're all familiar with. I mean, even with Bounce House, which takes place, hundreds and hundreds of years in the future, it's still something where you can see what the Rhythm Mafia are going through and experience and feel what they're dealing with, and you can kind of draw that line and that comparison to classic video games or video games that we're playing today. And I think that's where Baldur's Gate 3 comes in, is it feels really much like that, or very much like that. And it's just, and it's great. I mean, it's a great game. It really is. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about a first-person shooter dungeon crawler called Ziggurat, which is one that my friend Corey introduced me to. And it's a really excellent game. This is me playing it here on the Xbox. I also have it on Steam. And it's a first-person shooter dungeon crawler roguelike where the game is going to change every time you play it. There's different weapons and things like that you're going to get. You're able to kind of customize your build and your character as you go. And it's always going to be something a little bit different and a little bit silly. Like, one of the things that I think is kind of a hallmark of what you experience in the Carl books is that while the danger is ever present, and the danger is real, and the danger is heavy, there's always a little bit of goofiness behind the scenes as to what's going on. Like in the book I'm currently reading, The Butcher's Masquerade, one of the things that they refer to regularly are these mushroom men guards. And one of the, you fight mushroom men in Ziggurat, and that was the first thing I thought of. I was like, oh, that's them. That's great. And I mean, granted, they're not mushroom men in armor or anything like that, but it's still something where, it's a little bit silly, while still being action-packed enough that there's an underlying seriousness to the situation, even though it is a little bit goofy and a little bit irreverent at times. One that I don't think gets enough love, and one that I think is a lot of fun, and I think is an incredibly clever game, was Forspoken, which is from Square Enix, that dropped, I want to say last year or the year before. And it's a fish out of water game, and that's exactly what these books are about. You're taken into a situation where, in under a second, the world ends, and the only people that remain are the ones that, and this isn't a spoiler because this is the first chapter of the book, of the first book, in fact. The only people that remain are the ones that happen to be lucky enough to not be indoors at the time. So they are immediately thrust into this life or death situation and this impossible decision where you can either stay on the surface where there's no resources, no vehicles, no homes or anything like that, or you can go into the dungeon to try to fight your way to the end to survive. It's an impossible situation, and it's something that you can only make a decision like that in the heat of the moment. Like, if you have to sit here and hem and haw about it, you're never going to come to a satisfactory answer. And Forspoken's a lot like that as well, where you're a fish out of water, you're taken to this ridiculous fantasy realm, and you're a kid from New York. And that's a lot. Like it's you go from the streets of New York and moving around this urban jungle to high fantasy and monsters and things like that. And it's very much, you're taken out of your comfort zone, you're taken out of your natural environment, and that's crazy. Like it's such a ridiculous concept, but it's a signature experience that I think we've all kind of been in before. Like we've all been in situations where, obviously not to the degree of going to a fantasy world or having the planet destroyed, but where we've been thrust into a situation that we weren't comfortable, and it was fight or flight, and we had to decide what we were going to do, even if it was subconscious. And yeah, like that's very much, there's a lot of psychological play in the Dungeon Crawler Carl books where you're very much led to believe that Carl at the start is just a meathead. He's just an idiot. And as you go further into the story and you learn more about him and his past with his parents and his ex-girlfriend and Princess Donut, the Queen Anne Chonk, who is a cat, you really start to see the layers kind of peel back on this character that could have just been a trope and a doofus. And while he is kind of an idiot, he's a good-natured idiot, and he's kind and he's caring, and he is striving to do the right thing, and he won't let the world break him. And I think that's kind of the important things. Like that's his mantra, is "You will not break me." And that's such a cool character to rally behind for someone who is completely overwhelmed and well out of his league. He proves how clever he is and how resilient and resourceful he is, and it's awesome. Kind of like with Final Fantasy VI here, with mentioning the suplexing the train. I need to talk about Torchlight 2, any of the Torchlight games really, because they heavily involve pets. Pets are a big deal in the Dungeon Crawler Crawl series. Donut starts as a pet but becomes a crawler when she gets a pet modification treat, and she becomes hyper intelligent. She actually gets her own pet later on in the game. And pets are just all over the place. There's all kinds of important pets in the series, whether they're Lucia's Dobermans or Rottweilers, or whether they're Prepotente, the demonic goat. These are all pets that started off and have evolved as the story has gone on, and they're all excellent, and the pets in Torchlight are wonderful. So yeah, definitely the Torchlight series. This one might be reaching a little bit, but I really like this game, and it feels to me like playing as Star-Lord in the Guardians of the Galaxy game that came out a couple of years ago is very much like playing as Carl, because you're way in over your head. You have to deal with, frankly, party members that are idiots, and that happens to Carl pretty frequently as well. And there's a lot of moralistic choices you have to make and decisions you have to make as Star-Lord that affect so many people, and that's really the kind of the signature experience of what Carl has to go through, is these kind of crazy decisions he has to make in overwhelming odds, or being present in the face of overwhelming odds, and he's just constantly pushing himself forward, and that's kind of what Star-Lord does too. Like I said, it's not a one-to-one matchup. It doesn't really align perfectly, but I think it's close enough that I really do feel like it's a good thing to call out. Another one to me that I really think fits, and this is going to be another quick hit as well, and it's not necessarily because it feels like Dungeon Crawler Carl, but the level of humor in the game and the level of gore in the game is very aligned with what happens in the dungeon, and that would be Lollipop Chainsaw. It's a very hilarious game. I mean, it's written by James Gunn, so of course it's going to be funny, but the level of hyper-violence and just the amount of blood that is present in that game rivals what happens in Carl. Although Carl, I think, is significantly gorier if you actually read the passages and you kind of see what's happening. There are scenes where rooms fill up to the waist with blood and gore and guts, and it's like, oh, that's really nasty. I'm very curious to see how they're going to pull that off on the series when it launches on Peacock. It's going to be very interesting, but I think Lollipop Chainsaw kind of slides in as kind of maybe adjacent, not necessarily a one-to-one, but something that it's yeah, if you're looking for gore and humor, go with that one. All right, two more here I want to talk about. One of them is one I think is a great lineup, because it's Dungeon Crawler Carl. Enter the Gungeon is very similar in that regard, where you're able to choose from one of 4 classes, and as you play, you're going to completely customize your experience and find different weapons and be able to buy different upgrades and different power-ups and things like that. There's safe rooms, like when you go into shops, they're safe. You don't actually get attacked in those areas, and there's big bosses on every level, and like progressively more difficult characters as you fight through. And I think that's really close to what you experience in Carl as well. And it's just a great game. Like Enter the Gungeon is such a classic title, and it's something where like those odds of like those endless waves of enemies and just constantly having to dodge and having to move and bob and weave and duck your way out of combat is something that really feels aligned with Carl. But I think the one that is the most like it, and it's because it is such a just truly bizarre game, and it's such a mishmash of so many different things, especially with all the DLC that has come out for it, and the different kind of like tropes and aspects of other games and other universes that have been coming into play with it, would be Dead Cells. First off, it's hard. It's a very difficult game, and I think that's important when you look at what happens to Carl in the dungeon. Is it's never easy. It's never a simple thing for him to kind of get through. And as you go through, you're going to find all these different weapons and different abilities and influences from like external sources. Like eventually you're going to find stuff from Hotline Miami where you're this random dead thing that crawls into a body and reanimates it. And you can find a chicken helmet or a shotgun or a baseball bat. And it's like, where is that coming from? I'm in this medieval world. It's just this mishmash of tropes and entertainment pieces that are signatures to our world that the Cell is experiencing in Dead Cells. And as you go, big boss fights, difficult enemies, huge levels to traverse, and just multiple branching paths as you go, different stairways that you're able to take, it all lines up. And I think that is probably the best comparison to Dungeon Crawler Carl would be Dead Cells. That's it. That's my list. A bit of a different video this week. I've been reading the books. One of the things with kind of me getting away from social media is that I've had more time to not be on social media. So I've been reading more, and I've been going through these books. And I've read the first 4 over the last 2 weeks. I'm in the 5th book now, and I wanted to talk about them because I think they're fantastic. Like I've got merch. Like it's a current obsession. Like I said. If you read the books, what do you think about them? Let me know. What games do you feel, if you have read the books, do you feel are really representative of what Carl experiences? Like there's tons of references to other games. Like I could have put Frogger on here because it talks about Frogger in the game or in the books, but no, I don't like Frogger, so I'm not going to talk about it. But yeah, that's my list. Those are the games I wanted to talk about. Let me know what you think. Let me know what games you feel would fit in the dungeon. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a thumbs up. Engagement really helps the channel out. If you really enjoyed it, consider subscribing. Love to have you stick around. Until next time, folks, I've been Jay. Appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me. Remember to play more games, stay square, and take care. I'll talk to you soon.